What is up, YouTube? Today we're back with a video covering Setsuka, who is going to be the newest character, Covenant character, RGB Fire Thief. That's going to be added into the game after, Genesis Ras and, Lady of the Scales. Now, if you clicked on the video, this is going to be basically like a full breakdown on her in terms of, you can call it a first impressions video or a theory crafting video. I don't care what you call it. Hopefully you learn a thing or two. So we're gonna break into kind of her skills, and obviously she's hot as fuck. Like, I mean, look at her. Like, she could be in a fucking manhwa. I would fucking watch that. I would dude. I would do some crazy, dude, just like, and yeah. Anyhow, we really don't want to talk about her kit. Okay, so here are going to be her base stats. She's 113 base speed. She has self imprint HP and release imprint attack. So what does that mean, right? It means building her with high HP is not going to be too difficult since you're going to be getting HP percent increase on self. But the release imprint is actually very helpful because she is a evasion character, which we're going to break into her kit a bit later. But when you pair her with other characters that can utilize that evasion, like a Lone Wolf Payra on Nuvarius, like a Afternoon Soak Flan, like a unit on maybe Riposte set, which is going to be the new set that will be coming out, which basically grants you a 70% chance to counter when you evade. Right, we'll get into that in a moment, but that imprint I do want to point out is going to be very, very helpful for those kind of setups in those kind of team comps in RTA. From a Guild War perspective, we now have the potential of making units literally 100% evasion. That is a little bit absurd to think about. She has a really overloaded kit, but we're going to get into some thoughts here. So S2, basically, you're going to be granting 30% evasion to the entire team. Now, if your team evades, basically you immediately counter, right? Your counter is going to be an AoE attack. Now, if you haven't watched the video, this is kind of what it looks like. I mean, here, you can see the counter. It goes off, an extra hit, right? Now, at 100 fighting spirit, she's going to be able to generate, she gets 50% combat readiness, as you can see here, and she'll basically do a huge nuke. Now, 200% increase attack is a lot of fucking damage, okay? Attack buff is 50%. Okay, we don't have anything that remotely grants you up to 200%. Even like Sea Arena stacking 15% 5 times in PvE doesn't even equate to 200%. So that just kind of paints the picture in terms of like how much fucking damage that this actually gives to Setsuka. Now, if you watch this AoE damage in just a moment here, she gets 100 fighting spirit. And this AoE does a lot of damage. I mean, she just basically tanks all her HP. And look at how much damage you're doing to Empyrean Illinav. 20k damage with Indomitable. That is actually a little bit absurd if you think about it, okay? Now, moreover, one thing I do want to highlight as well in her kit is that she cannot be subject to damage sharing effects. So what does that mean? That basically means that, shout out to the chat, Lady of the Scales passive, you're not going to be able to put her in the front and kind of abuse like the whole damage sharing passive with Lady of the Scales. And if you don't know what Lady of the Scales is, her kit is, I mean, too fucking bad. Go watch her video. I'm not here to explain that to you, okay? Now, let's talk about her S3. Now, her S3 is going to dispel all buffs, so a full strip, and inflicts Beguile and decrease hit chance for 2 turns. It ignores effect resistance. Sorry, let me say that again. It ignores effect resistance, okay? What are they doing? It's not even a soul burn ability. It literally ignores effect resistance if they have lower max HP than her. So as you can see in this video, she goes for the S3. She lands Beguile, decrease hit chance on basically everybody as she is 25k HP, right? Now, those knights that are on, if you're an ER gamer and you have high HP, you're playing ML Aria, you're playing Empyrean Illinav, you're playing Bellion, that might not be something that you're going to be too worried about, right? Because they're not going to have, she's not going to have higher HP than you. And chances are they're not going to have more, like they're not going to have built-in effectiveness. So if you are an effect resistance player, you don't really need to worry. But if you're also an effect resistance player, you might need to find a fucking bridge in PUBG. Now her S1 is basically just going to do damage. She has built-in lifesteal, as you can see here, right? She absorbs some of the damage as health, and her damage will be dealt proportional to her max HP. Now, Soulburn's going to increase her damage by a lot, so you can see it does 13k to Ruel. Not a huge amount, I would say, but her artifact is very strong as well. It's going to grant her evasion for 20%. After counterattacking when the target is alive, she has a 40% chance to activate a basic skill once more. So what does that mean? If she counters, which is basically when anybody evades on her team, she has a 40% chance to do another S1. And why is that important? Because it's free damage, free healing, fighting spirit gain, and the 40% chance is actually higher than Dust Devil, which is kind of where you would get that extra basic skill attack, right? It doesn't work exactly like Dust Devil, but I'd like to think this is almost like a buffed up, supercharged Dust Devil. Okay, now on screen here that I'm going to be pulling up is something that I kind of broke down on stream. So if you watch this on stream, thank you for coming to the YouTube video. She is voiced by the Fen AVA, shout out to Death Scythe. Now, if you want to just take a look at what's on screen, I broke down the skills, but most importantly, some key things that you can kind of pay attention to while I talk about it. Repause set is going to be the newest equipment set that's going to be added to Epic 7, which is from the otherworldly gear that was hinted at part 1 of the 7-year anniversary. And that means that you have a 70% chance to counter. So think about you putting, riposte on like a fire flan, for example, right? You're going to have 70% chance to counter, and you have extra evasion. So the flan's going to be at like with focus, she has 120% evasion, right? Now they haven't mentioned anything about evasion not exceeding 100 because technically we don't really have any super guaranteed countermeasures in place to deal with any evasion over 100% from what I understand. But evasion, like I mentioned, can exceed 100%. So if you have Assassin Cartuja, if you have any artifacts, Rampage from Lone Wolf Payra, or just her passive alone, she'll be able to grant over 100% evasion in some setups. Now, if you're an RTA player like myself and you're thinking about matchups, where is she good, where is she bad, what potential does she have? She's good into Harsetti matchups, right? Any built-in evasion is an extra win condition. If you have Aiden in your team, very often in a Harsetti matchup, he gets even gets even more evasion. Firefly, same concept, right? They get even more evasion. If you throw a riposte set on them, that's a lot of extra damage potential. That's a lot of more extra RNG, a lot more extra win conditions in that kind of matchup. Now, of course, we're gonna have to wait and see what her multipliers look like. Is she gonna be totally insane or whatever? Just based off the hero introduction video, she looks really strong, right? 20k damage on Indomitable Ilanav is a big deal. Okay, of course, there's the fact of Aureus and all those things, but we'll see. Now, she's going to be good in standard matchups as well. So if you're playing just like no one's really cleaving, playing Harsetti, it's just kind of like a slow versus slow or standard versus standard, she's going to be good as well. Like for the same reasons for Harsetti, right? She's giving you extra odds, extra win conditions, abusing the new set, yada, yada, yada. And now she is also going to be good in anti-cleave matchups. Now, why is she going to be good in anti-cleave? Because she is granting 30% evasion to the entire team, right? It's not even like 20. Like Rampage from Lone Wolf Payra is 20. They're just dark units. This is a straight up passive 30% evasion to the entire team. So versus any of the cleavers, like they have to just immediately deal with a 30% lose con, right? It was already annoying enough, right? Versus aim and cleave, like there were already countermeasures for the strays, like Wukong, like Yoha, things like that, right? Or even Assassin Cartuja. Now, if they go like Judge Kisei, which is kind of one of the bridges that people didn't really figure out towards the end of the season, now you kind of have this as well, right? You have 30% odds to evade. Are those good odds versus cleave? Not necessarily, but they will give you extra odds, and depending on what people cook up, could have some potential, right? As an anti-cleave setup, when you pair it with a lot of other units that maybe you can kind of think of. I can't think of any anti-cleave setups because we'll have to see what the meta is going to look like when Lady of the Scales come out, how Genesis Wrath is going to affect the meta, what the EE is going to be on Yulha, and there's so many things that are going to be happening, so we'll have to see. Pay attention to the RTA series to kind of cover that in more detail. But this is potentially good for aggro players, particularly to just deny it from the enemy player, right? If you're the person that has Lone Wolf Payra on your team, chances are you're going to want to have Setsuka on your team as well, right? You're going to be getting extra evasion odds. You're denying it from the team. You have an ignore ER soul burn. So at 113 base, you could still build her at like a 270, 280 build. Very possible to basically just strip off the team and set up some kind of cleave or aggro high tempo draft with like a DPS. There's some potential, right? But Gaia obviously is going to be good into really, really tanky teams as well. So versus tank down, this is going to be amazing, right? Mind you, you might need to look at like some kind of like effectiveness build if you're going to go that route, which is not advised, just for the record. Now, what are going to be? We talked about a lot about why she's going to be good in matchups and stuff like that. Let's talk about counters, right? Counters for Setsuka off rip. New Moon Luna, right? New Moon Luna can seal. They can play aggro. They can cleave you. They can take away your passive of the evasion. You can't gain fighting spirit. Overall, I mean, New Moon Luna counters basically every passive in the game, so that's an obvious one, right? Or a Meru Seal, if you don't have Luna. If you're looking for some kind of countermeasure, you can go Emeru, assuming they don't have Boss Aroka. Any resource reduction, primarily C Phantom Politis. Okay, I did write down Elvira, but C Phantom Politis will do way better than Elvira, obviously, because the resource reduction, not only are you denying the fighting spirit, but more importantly, you're also reducing their tempo, right? You're applying the speed down, you have rage on your team, you're able to apply pressure, right? So that in itself is good so that they can't take too many turns, no cycling, blah blah blah, right? Mort and Astromancer Elena, obviously no counters, right? Any form of debuffers, and when I say debuffer, I'm talking like non-contact debuffers. DDR, ML Tenebria, Fumir, Masara Town. I'm talking to you guys. Those are gonna work, right? Anything that doesn't need any contact, which is like actual like hitting the enemy, that's gonna be useful. Obviously, because the sleep will take away their evasion. That's important, right? Lionheart Sturmia, right? Lionheart Sturmia stocks are at an all-time high because if Setsuka counters, Lionheart is going to go fucking turbo. So if you have a Lionheart, this is probably the time you're going to want to invest some really, really premium gear. I'm talking some fucking 440 GS, Destro gear, immunity, most likely, because if you're fighting versus Lomo Pera, you're going to want to have immunity in case you're wondering, okay? Symbol, obviously, so that you have extra odds of hitting the enemy, because 20%, a 30% evasion versus 20% hit chance reduces those odds down to 10%, right? So we're going to see a lot of Lionheart Sturmia, not just in standard matchups, even in like cleave setups, right? That's going to be a really good 4 or 5 if you're a cleaver or an aggro player yourself. MLK1 obviously going to be very good, right? You're going to be able to get 100% hit chance on S3. They're going to be able to... Also, MLK1 is typically higher HP than Setsuka, which means she's not going to be able to ignore ER and take away the counter buff. So the Kron is going to be able to counter as well if any form of AoE comes your way, right? So that he's going to be a very strong pickup as well. Start investing some more premium gear into him as well. Now, Roana is going to be useful in some matchups just because there's going to be a lot of counters coming your way. She's kind of like a soft counter. She's not like a really, really hard counter per se, so just be mindful of that. And any fixed damage, Uberius Pera, 3F Bellion, 3F Dragon Ride Senya, 3F LRK, anything like that, right? It's going to give you some extra odds to fighting any comp that does involve Setsuka. And shout out to Cookie. Shadow Knight Pillis also, we might be seeing a return, potentially. She does mitigate a lot of the counter damage, some of the best counter mitigation in the game, and has 75% hit chance on S3, which means if you do need to lock down a target, will we potentially see the return of Rocket Punch Pillis that we saw like 5, I want to say 6 seasons ago during the Candy meta? Will we see a comeback? We'll never know. But I'm sure in Guild War, Shadow Knight Pillis is most likely getting a return. And I know a lot of you OG Guild War players did play Pillis, Roana, Lionheart. The OG comp back then with the Lifesteal Army and all that shit. That's probably going to come back if you see a Setsuka comp. So I'll make a separate video kind of going a little bit more in detail about Setsuka and how she might work in Guild War, maybe on defense and offense. I don't know. When she comes out and we see her multipliers, there'll be a lot more information that we can kind of piggy off of. But if you guys did enjoy this kind of breakdown or like first impressions video, please drop a like, comment for the algorithm, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know if you guys have enough bookmarks to get her. Get ready because she's coming in September and she's coming in fast. So thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.